So let us proceed with a terrible show today. May I sing for you one last time before I ride off into the sunset? I would like to sing to you. Would you like to hear me sing to you? You don't have a choice. Then turn off your radio for the next half hour and come back at 1 o'clock when I have a guest and I will stop singing to you. But from now until 12:35, I will sing Walter Benjamin for you. I am unpacking my library. Yes, I am. The books are not yet on the shelves, not yet touched by the mild boredom of order. I cannot march up and down their ranks to pass them in review before a friendly audience. You need not fear any of that. Instead, I must ask you to join me in the disorder of crates that have been wrenched open, the air saturated with the dust of wood, the floor covered with torn paper, to join me among piles of volumes that are seeing daylight again after 2 years of darkness, so that you may be ready to share with me a bit of the mood. It is certainly not an elegiac mood, but rather one of anticipation, which these books arouse in a genuine collector. Such a man is speaking to you, and on closer scrutiny, he proves to be speaking only about himself. Would it not be presumptuous of me if, in order to appear convincingly objective and down to earth, I enumerated for you the main sections and prized pieces of a library? If I presented you with their history or even their usefulness to a writer, I, for one, have in mind something less obscure, something more palpable than that. What I am really concerned with is giving you some insight into the relationship a book collector has to his possessions, into collecting rather than a collection. If I do this by elaborating on the various ways of acquiring books, there is something entirely arbitrary. This or any other procedure is merely a dam against the springtide of memories which surges toward any collector as he contemplates his possessions. Every passion borders on the chaotic, but the collector's passion borders on the chaos of memories. More than that. The chance, the fate that suffuse the past before my eyes are conspicuously present in the accustomed confusion of these books. For what else is this collection but a disorder to which a habit has accommodated itself to such an extent that it can appear as order? You have all heard of people whom the loss of their books has turned into invalids, or those who in order to acquire them become criminals. There are very areas in which any order is a balancing of extreme precariousness. The only exact knowledge there is that Anatoly fronts is that the knowledge of the date of publication and the format of books. And indeed, if there is a counterpart to the confusion of a library, it is the order of its catalog. Thus, there is in the life of a collector a dialectical tension between the poles of order and disorder. Or naturally his existence is tied to many other things as well, to a very mysterious relationship to ownership, something about which we will have more to say later. Also, to a functional relationship to objects, which does not emphasize their functional utilitarian value, that is their usefulness, but studies and loves them as the scene, the stage of their fate. The most profound enchantment for the collector is the locking of individual items within the magic circle in which they are fixed is the final thrill. The thrill of acquisition passes over them. Everything remembered and thought, everything conscious becomes the pedestal, the frame, the base, the lock of his property, the period, the region, the craftsmanship, the former ownership. For a true collector, the whole background of an item adds up to a magic encyclopedia whose quintessence is the fate of its object. In this circumscribed area, then, it may be surmised how the great physiognomists, the collectors, are the physiognomists of the world of objects, turn into interpreters of fate. One only has to watch a collector handle the objects in his glass case as he holds them in his hands, as he seems to be seeing through them into their distant past, as though inspired. So much for the magical side of the collector, his ornate image, I might call it. La Ventura Fata Libere. These words may have been intended as a general statement about books. So books like the Divine Comedy, Spinoza's Ethics, the origins of species have their fates. A collector, however, interprets this Latin saying differently. For him, not only books, but also copies of books have their fates. And in this sense, the most important fate of a copy is its encounter with him. With his own collection, I am not exaggerating when I say that to a true collector, the acquisition of an old book is its rebirth. This is the childlike element, which in a collector mingles with the element of old age. For children can accomplish the renewal of existence in 100 unfailing ways.
Sì, era una biblioteca.
Collecting is only one process of renewal. The other processes are the painting of objects, the cutting out of figures, the application of decals. The whole range of childlike modes of acquisition, from touching things to giving them names, to renew the old world. That is the collector's deepest desire when he is driven to acquire new things. And that is why a collector of old books is closer to the wellsprings of collecting than the acquirer of luxury editions. How do books cross the threshold of a collection and become the property of a collector? The history of their acquisition is the subject of the following remarks. Of all the ways of acquiring books, writing them oneself is regarded as the most praiseworthy method. At this point, many of you will remember with pleasure the library with Jean-Paul's poor little schoolmaster, Wurtz, gradually acquired by writing himself all of the works whose titles interested him in book fair catalogs. After all, he could not afford to buy them. Writers are really people who write books not because they are poor, but because they are dissatisfied with the books which they could buy but do not like. You, ladies and gentlemen, may regard this as a whimsical definition of a writer, but everything said from the angle of a real collector is whimsical. Of the customary modes of acquisition, the one most appropriate to a collector would be the borrowing a book, with its intended non-returning. Oh, the borrower of real stature whom we envision here proves himself to be an inveterate collector of books, not so much by the fervor with which he guards his borrowed treasures, and by the deaf ear which he turns to all remainders. From the everyday world of legality, as by his failure to read these books. If my experience may serve as evidence, man is more likely to return a borrowed book upon occasion than to read it. this day, Balzac's Peau de Chagrin stands out from long rows of French volumes in my library as a memento to the most exciting experience at an auction. This happened in 1915 at the Roman auction put up by Emile Hirsch, one of the greatest book experts and most distinguished of dealers. The edition in question appeared in 1838 in Paris, Place de la Bourse. As a collector, I picked up my copy. I see not only its number in the Roman catalog, but even the label of the shop in which the first owner bought the book 90 years ago for 1/80th of today's price. Papeterie Yvana, it says, in a fine age, which it was still possible to buy such a deluxe edition at a stationery dealer's. All the steel engravings of this book were designed by the foremost French graphic artist and executed by the foremost engravers. But I was going to tell you how I acquired this book. Well, I had gone to Emile Hirsch's for an advance inspection, and he had handled 40 or 50 volumes. That particular volume had inspired me in the ardent desire to hold on to it forever. The day of the auction came. As chance would have it, in the sequence of the auction, this copy of Le Peau de Chagrin was preceded by a complete set of its illustrations, printed separately on India paper. All the bidders sat at a long table. Diagonally across from me sat the man who was the focus of all eyes at the first bid, the famous Munich collector, Baron von Simolin. He was greatly interested in the set, but he had rival bidders. In short, there was a spirited contest, which resulted in the highest bid of the entire auction, far in excess of 3,000 marks. No one seemed to have expected such a high figure, and all of those present were quite excited. Emile Hirsch remained unconcerned, and whether he wanted to save time or was guided by some other consideration, he proceeded on to the next item with no one really paying any attention. He called out the price, and with my heart pounding and with the full realization I was able to compete with any of those big collectors, I bid a somewhat higher amount. Without arousing the bidder's attention, the auctioneer went through the usual routine. Do I hear more? And 3 bangs of the gravel. With an eternity seeming to separate each from the next. And proceeded to add the auctioneer's charge. For a student like me, the sum was considerable. The following morning at the pawn shop is no longer part of this story, and I should prefer to speak about another incident which I should like to call the negative of an auction. It happened last year at a Berlin auction. The collection of books was offered with such a miscellany in quality and subject matter and only a number of rare works on occultism and natural philosophy were of note. Now, I am on the last half-emptied case, and it is way past midnight. Other thoughts fill me than the ones I've been talking about. Not thoughts, but images, memories. Memories of the cities in which I found so many things. Riga, Naples, Munich, Danzig, Moscow, Florence, Basel, Paris. Walter Benjamin, for you.
Oftentimes, I'll read academic papers or reviews about my work, and I won't even recognize it as being my work. And in a sense, my work is so objectified that and it's so far outside of myself that any criticism that you bring to it, any ideas that you bring to it are valid ideas. And I can be completely surprised by the way people are speaking about something I've written, because in a sense I haven't really written it. I've just sort of moved it, onto a pedestal for everybody to examine. So it's a much cleaner way of dealing with an artifact, saying, gee, isn't that interesting? Any angle you hit on that thing is going to be right. And I kind of feel that contemporary writing needs to be self-conscious of the media and manipulate it as its primary content. If you aren't making artworks with the intention of having them copied, you aren't really making art for the 21st century. The plagiarism and copyright trials of the 21st century are what the obscenity trials were of the 20th century. These are really the issues of our time. Now, of course, we have no more, obscenity to get through. Everything is done, but we still have problems with plagiarism. And so to me, these are reproducibility, replication, mirroring, reproduction, copyright, intellectual property are really the true content of writing in the 21st century, at least in the early 21st century. This is a CBS News Special Report. I'm Dan Raviv. About a half hour after word that pop star Michael Jackson suffered a heart attack in Los Angeles, it's now reported and reliably reported that he has died. Los Angeles Times website says Michael Jackson, age 50, has died. He was in a coma when taken from an expensive rental home in Los Angeles. The TMZ website has also been reporting that Michael Jackson has died. We go live now to Los Angeles. CBS News correspondent Steve Futterman. Well, Dan, if this is all correct, it's just a shock here in Southern California and around the world. The LA Times, as you said, saying that Michael Jackson was pronounced dead, according to the LA Times, by doctors this afternoon and arriving at the hospital.
of mind ever